Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Hello again, and welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us on whatever platform you happen to be listening on. One of the reasons why I started this podcast was to hear from coaches who I otherwise would never be able to hear from. And my guest today is an example of one of those coaches, and I'm happy to have him on, and I'm also happy to be discussing this topic about growing players beyond the sport of basketball and making sure that we're growing people not just as basketball players, but we're growing them beyond that. So here to talk with me about that subject is Coach Max Anderson. Coach, how are you today?
I am good, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
No problem. I'm excited to get into this. I'm excited to get into your perspective because we teach so much more than just the game of basketball, and I think it's worth dedicating some time to this topic. But before we get into any of that, like I do with all my guests, Coach, I want to get into your basketball journey, where basketball's taken you, what opportunities it's led for you, and where it is that you're at right now. So, Coach, go ahead.
Awesome. Like you said, you wouldn't have met me otherwise. That means that I am from New Zealand, tiny little New Zealand down in Oceania. So kia ora to you, which is the Māori welcome. I started playing basketball first when I was, I think, about 7. My parents took me to a little rec league kind of training thing and tried to get me interested into it. I was pretty decent, but I was a shy kid, so I didn't know any of the other kids there, so I dropped that. Didn't pick it up again until I was in my year 12. What's that for you guys? Junior year at high school.
Yeah.
I didn't pick it up again until then, so I wasted a fair bit of time, unfortunately. But I played those last 2 years of high school. I coached 1 year in high school, and then my first year out of high school, my younger brother, who was at the same school that I was at, the team didn't have a coach for a junior team, so I jumped on to make sure he could play, and I ended up coaching, and I've coached ever since for the last 10 or so years. I've coached volleyball as well. I've studied sports and exercise performance and worked as a strength and conditioning coach as well. And now I'm the head coach of our senior boys teams.
So you didn't even really get the transition from playing into coaching. It just sort of all started at the same time for you. You were playing, and then it was like, well, now it's time to coach. Now it's time to do both at the same time. What's the main sport over there in New Zealand? What do people mostly play over there?
The one we're known for the most is rugby.
Mm-hmm.
That's our national sport and everything like that. But in terms of actual numbers, especially in high school, netball is the biggest one.
Okay.
Although netball is trending downwards. So I looked up some statistics from 2019, because obviously 2020's sports participation stats are actually scuffed with COVID going on.
Right.
But basketball's second on the most participated list, but it's upwards 13%, and netball's down 8%, and it's only slightly above basketball. So basketball's really trending upwards. The other big ones that are trending upwards are futsal and waka ama, which is Māori canoe racing, but their numbers are absolutely tiny compared to basketball. So basketball is the highest played sport with the highest upwards trend in terms of participation.
Well, that kind of leads right into my next question, because when people think of sports in New Zealand, at least here stateside, where we don't really think of basketball players first off when we think of sports that are played in New Zealand. So I want to talk about that really quickly before we get into our topic. You say that you said that the game has been growing, which means probably when you were younger, it isn't near the level that it is at right now. So in your experience, how has the game grown in New Zealand? What's your experience been with getting people interested in the sport, kind of on the coaching side?
Honestly, I'd have to give a really big shout out to Stephen Adams, the center from the Oklahoma City Thunder, who's a Kiwi. He has done just his presence in the NBA has lifted up basketball in New Zealand big time. He's come back. He's built different courts around New Zealand and run basketball camps, done basketball programs, and really helped out the basketball community here. So he's a huge influence on getting kids involved. But yeah, when I was younger, most of us played soccer or rugby. The girls played netball, very, very basic.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, I think our first NBA player was Sean Marks, who is now I think he's the GM for the Brooklyn Nets. And then we've had another player, Kurt Benny, had a couple of 10-day contracts with the Miami Heat and stuff like that back in the day. And then recently, Corey Webster and Shea Illy have had a couple of training camps with people. But those, of course, when you have a 10-day, it's a big deal in New Zealand. It's on the news and everything like that, but doesn't necessarily translate to long-term success.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with the competition level that you guys have over there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so since those players have started to get more into it, the participation level here has gone up tremendously. We've got a decent bunch of players over playing D1 in America at the moment for different programs, and the kids are just loving it. The local teams are going to the primary schools. They're training the younger kids and getting them involved, and everyone's just getting really hyped about basketball. In terms of getting kids into it, it is hard to compete with rugby. I'm not going to lie about that one. Even if they're in the team, sometimes they'll still be hitting me up going, "Oh, sir, I got to miss training today. I've got rugby training instead."
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a challenge with that. But as a coach, you make do and you go, okay, you might not be the star player, but I don't know if you've ever seen rugby being played, but it's some
A bit, yeah.
big, strong, tough dudes. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, these guys can at least come in and set a solid screen for sure.
Yeah. Right.
So you kind of a couple of allowances, especially if you're at a small school like I am.
Right. I could imagine you have to do a little bit of recruiting and trying to get people interested, only because basketball, at least from what I know of sports like rugby, like basketball doesn't really like translate too well. Like it's not something that I feel like a lot of people are just like playing on the side if they're like really invested in rugby or really invested in other sport. Like I feel like the skill sets maybe don't necessarily translate. So I'm just curious if you're getting one of these
Yeah.
rugby players, how their shooting form is looking when they first put up a shot.
Yeah, we work on shooting. We definitely start close to the basket with these guys. Yeah, my mum works at the college that I coach at, and she'll let me know if any new players or new kids come to the school. I'm going, "Mum, are they tall? Are they athletic? I can teach them how to shoot. I can teach them the skill part. I like
Right.
a big body."
Right.
But yeah, these rugby players, they come in. They'll pick up a few fouls, but if you want someone to fight for a rebound for you, Dennis
Yeah.
Rodman style, they'll go at it. Yeah.
Right. Well, hey, I'm the same way as you. If there's somebody, if they're athletic, if they have the ability to work hard, shoot, I can teach them basketball. But if they're willing to work hard and they're athletic, sounds good to me, right? Especially like you said, they
For
won't
sure.
struggle. They won't struggle setting a screen. It doesn't sound like that's the case at all. So, our topic, it's one that's near and dear to me, and I think it is to a lot of coaches who they want to leave an impact that is more than just teaching basketball and more than just teaching them plays and sets and formations like that. Most coaches really want to leave an impact that goes far beyond that. And that's a passion that you have. And you and I talked a little bit off air about how one of your passions is to grow the men that you coach beyond just being basketball players. What does that mean to you to be able to grow men beyond basketball players? How do you try and do that so that they're growing into something that's greater than just basketball athletes?
For sure, for sure. I mean, to me as a coach, I'm at a reasonably small school, sub 300 students, and that's going from 11 and 12-year-olds right up to 17, 18-year-olds. So it's a very small school. So we don't expect to get necessarily the best talent. We're not exactly shipping a whole lot of kids off to D1 or to America, or even having them play semi-pro here. So our measure of success is really, can you leave school and continue to play sport with confidence and be a good person walking through the world. So for how we do that, I'm going to be honest with you, it is hard when the school itself does not necessarily support sport in a big way. Our school, I've got lots of love for the school. It's the same school that I went to, the same school that I coached at. It's a very academic-based school. We have really great pass rates. We have really high scores, and we achieve really well academically. But because of that, there's not been a whole lot of attention paid to sports. Myself, I'm a volunteer coach. All our coaches are volunteers, and it's been a struggle over the years to really get the right kind of support from the school and the right kind of financial backing to make the programs a success. And then that, of course, plays into how much you can really connect with players and do the extra stuff to make them and to make sure they're good people and stuff like that. But in terms of what we can do, it's a lot of personal connection, a lot of talking to your players one-on-one. I have group chats going with my players, always sending them stuff. And everything on the court and in training is a teachable moment. If someone sets a screen and whoever got screen turns around and gives them a shove because they don't like the way they got hit, that's a teachable moment. We can jump on that right quick and go, look, why'd you shove him? Oh, he hit me. I didn't know it was coming. Well, is he to blame for that? He's on the other team. If he hits you and you don't know it's coming, good job to him. Why are you getting mad? I didn't know it was there. I got smacked. Well, talk to your teammate. Why didn't he tell you the screen was there? Everything like that. So teaching communication of that kind of stuff and the value of it, how to react to those situations. You know, a lot of these boys come from less than desirable backgrounds, I'll say. I had one player the other day message me and go, oh, sorry, sir, I couldn't make it to practice. My mum had a really bad hangover. So
yeah,
it's stuff like that where it's like, okay, the space that you get to play sport in is really your escape from real life. And it's really turning that escape into a learning environment and building a strong team culture as well. I think that the team culture is one of the most important things to letting that transition from sport go into real life. So we've been working on building the team culture for a couple of years now. In my younger days of coaching, I was very Coach Carter-ish, you know, come in and we're going to do suicides because you guys suck, everything like that. And over the years, I've grown. Over the years, I've changed, and now at the point where it's all about culture, all about talking to them. I don't like, you know, if you miss a layup, everyone's doing 10 push-ups. I'm personally not a fan of that because we don't get a whole lot of gym time, or time for practice. So it's like, I'm not going to bother wasting my time with a whole lot of punishments when we could be using that time to learn in this very limited time. And I communicate that with the players as well. So I say, look, boys, this is how I coach. I don't want to waste my time doing that. So don't make me do that. So a lot of it is also communicating my coaching style with the players and working with them to both build the team and letting them help me build my coaching style. It's a very give and take relationship. One of the big things we say with communication is there's two halves to it. There's talking, then the other half is listening. So that goes for the players and that goes for me as well. I've got to listen to them and really build those relationships. And then there's all the other things that I know there's the big conversation that's been going on for years about what they teach in schools in terms of financial literacy, how kids don't get taught how to, you know, pay bills, write checks, open a bank account, all that stuff. But I'm currently studying, one of my majors is finance. So I'm always talking to the boys about financial literacy and making sure they're getting that stuff sorted out for their future life. That's a little bit of it.
Well, no, there's a lot there that I have down that I think a lot of coaches can relate to and empathize with and kind of have similar situations. So I'm going to touch on a few things here that you said. The first one was that you talked about how you're in a small school, less than 300 students in it, and the school doesn't really have an emphasis on sports. Sports isn't something that people are necessarily going to that school for. So am I correct then that you're in a situation where the kids who are going to that school, they're not necessarily like expecting to be like D1 players? Is there a message that you have to explain in terms of what the expectations for them are going to be, or do they kind of already understand that because of the school culture?
They understand that a little bit from the school culture. Of course, when you're a teenager, you don't always choose the school that you get to go to. It's the parents look at it and go, right, you're going there. And our school's a special character school, so it's a religious affiliation. So it's a lot of the parents that are affiliated with that religion will see their kids there.
Right.
So it's very much about the academics and the religious aspect. There's a couple of kids that do have a lot of potential. Our current captain is actually a player that played on. There's another big school where I live that is, dominant in this area, going to nationals and placing very highly. I think they've won over a couple of times. Had a few D1 players go there, and this kid actually got kicked out of that school and is now at our school and is our captain. I have no idea what he get kicked out for. I'll say that. That's one of the things I do use to build relationships. Is I went up to this. My mother told me, "Oh, we've got a new student. He's from this other school, and he's athletic. He's tall." So I went up to school at lunchtime. I met him. Right. I'm like, "But dude, I heard you got kicked out of the other school. I don't need to know why you got kicked out. Just tell me that whatever it is that you got kicked out for is dealt with. It's over. It's in the past." He's like, "Yep, it's over." I'm like, "Cool. Never tell me what you got kicked out for. I don't need to know because I'm trusting you that it's dealt with." And from that groundwork. He's now extremely relational with me. He's always talking to me. He's always coming with me on new ideas. There's a lot of trust built off that first foundation. But yeah, the kids like him, he got told early on at his other school, you have a chance to go to America for either volleyball or basketball. So he's kind of got that expectation.
Yeah.
But the other ones, yeah, it's not so much about taking them further with sport in terms of college or D1 or even junior college.
Right.
It's more like, can we use this as a kind of mode of transportation to get you away from, say, gang life or away from depression or something like that? Yeah.
Right. It's an activity kind of to keep them occupied, keep them busy, kind of keep them engaged in something. It sounds like, and
most definitely.
And I like what you said about that story about the student that you took in, and once that student said that they dealt with that issue, then you let them move on. I think a lot of kids really could deal with or do well with having somebody kind of giving them a second chance and not constantly holding back or holding against them something that they may have done in the past, and just giving them that opportunity to grow. And it sounds like this particular player is kind of flourishing with that, which is great.
Yeah.
So kind of going along with that, I'm curious because this is a situation I personally find myself in, so other coaches might as well. Because your school doesn't really focus or have a lot of tradition with sports, and I'll just be upfront, my school doesn't either. Do you find that the parents, because I'm not sure what else your school offers besides sports, but do you find that the parents and the families are fine with their players doing sports, or with their sons and daughters doing sports, or would they rather have them be doing something else? Do you have to sell the importance of athletics to the parents, or is it like you said, where they're just happy that they're doing something and their kid is being a part of something?
Yeah, for sure. There's been a couple of kids that have had bad test scores one year and then come to me the next year and go, "Oh, sorry, sir, I can't play this year. Mum's seen my results and I have to study." Yeah, there's definitely been a couple of ones like that, unfortunately. And I mean, I'm never one to kind of look down on how someone parents their kid. I'm not a parent yet, so I would never go into someone else's yard and say, "You need to do this better as a parent." Of course, unless you see them smacking their kid around, then you go say something. But yeah, it can be hard with some parents. Other parents are great. Other parents are sporting parents or active parents, and they will send their kids along to training. They will encourage their kids at home. They'll take their kids for runs and stuff like that. They're the great parents, and I've had other parents back me up against the school. I say against, it wasn't adversarial, but
no, I know what you mean.
Yeah, they've had my side. And it's fantastic when parents do that kind of thing. You're sitting in a meeting trying to convince the school to let the team go to a competition, and you've got a couple of parents that are like, oh, what's the point? You know, they're not that good, or they're going to miss a week of study. And then you've got other parents going, forget the study. This is the kind of thing that the kid can look back on and hold on to throughout his entire life.
Mm-hmm.
That in school they went to a competition and that they played well. That's something that they can hold on to. So yeah, some parents are great, but there is definitely, with, like you said, the emphasis on, well, you could be playing sport, but is that really the best use of your time?
Yeah, I think I've faced those situations before too. And first off, it's a dream if you can get those parents who are on your side and support you and understand the usefulness of sports. And I've always tried to explain to parents that what their daughters, in my case, or if they let their player play for me, they should be getting so much more beyond basketball. They should be learning so much more that they're going to apply in their life. And I really like what you said about the memories that they'll get for getting to play in that competition. Hopefully is going to be more long lasting than that week of study or whatever. And I'm not diminishing academics at all.
For sure.
And I both hold our players to high academic standards, but giving them the opportunities, especially because you did mention that some of your players, not a lot of your players, also kind of come from some rougher backgrounds too, right? So these experiences are probably ones that they might not normally get to experience, right?
10 out of 10.
Yeah.
You hit the nail on the head with that one.
And so another thing that you mentioned in your answer was like you keep in contact with your players and you have like a group chat with them. Was that something that you've kind of always done as a coach, or is that something you've kind of done more recently, is having those group chats?
In the past, I'd say 4 years, I started doing it a lot more. Earlier on, when my younger brother was on the team, there wasn't as much need for it because, I go in the other room and say, "Oi, tell everybody, blah blah blah."
Yeah.
But yeah, recently, I mainly use Instagram just because it's nice and easy. I can send them other video clips of basketball ideas and stuff like that as well. It's really handy.
Right.
But yeah, a lot more recently I've been doing that, and it's been great because you get to catch certain behaviors in those group chats as well. Because when you're on Instagram, of course, it's like all social media. You're hidden behind a little bit of a veil. You get to reveal a little bit more of your true self, I guess, is how you'd put it.
Right.
You're not as guarded as you are when you're talking person to person. So these guys come into the group chat and they might start ripping on a certain player, and what you guys get to see is other players standing up for that player and sorting out the situation themselves, which is absolutely fantastic. Or you get to kind of see that behavior and then get to address it in training. So like the other week we had one player who was in our group chat and he was super hyped for the game that Friday. He was really amped. He was very conversational and expressing how hyped he was. And a couple of the other players were giving him a little bit of a razzed up about it and saying, "Bro, you need to just calm down a little bit. This isn't the NBA, blah, blah, blah." And then we had our team captain come into it and be like, "Yo, what the heck are you guys doing? The dude's hyped. He should be hyped. It's a basketball game. You guys should be hyped too. You need to cut it out." And as a coach, I love to see that. Yeah. I love to see one player taking charge and kind of laying down the law in terms of good behavior and stuff like that. And then also you get to see people coming in using not so much racist slurs, because we have a lot of island kids on the team from the Pacific Islands, and Melanesia, Polynesia. So the certain racist slurs are done away with very quickly. Everyone knows their place with that, and that's been addressed in training. But people coming in and saying, "Oh, this is gay. Oh, bro, you're so gay," stuff like that, that gets to be cut out very quickly. Right. Because I have that kind of insight into, oh, okay, you guys are using it like that. That's not on. We don't do that here. Check that at the door. Ideally, check it out of your whole life. But
yeah, right.
In basketball, which I kind of have a say in, this isn't okay, and this is why. I think explaining the why is always really big. And I think you see that with some coaches. They kind of go a little bit classic parenty with it. They say, "We're not doing this because I said so." where it's like, if you kind of give the reasoning and let the kids see the reasoning and reason it out for themselves in their own head, they're going to get it a lot better, and they're going to be able to kind of transition it into other areas of their life, use that same logic there.
Well, and that goes kind of with this whole idea of trying to grow your players beyond basketball. You know, if you just say, well, we're just don't do that because I said that, that doesn't really lead to a lot of opportunity for growth. But if you do explain, you know, here's why that isn't acceptable, or if you even ask, it's funny, if you even ask your players, like, why do you say that? And sometimes they'll just kind of look at you and just be like, but if you question them, and those moments of just even questioning them or explaining, you know, why that language isn't even tolerated, those could be hugely impactful to a player's life, and they might not realize it at that moment, but just getting them to even think about why they even use the language that they do. They probably never had anyone question them about it or have them explain their thinking about it, especially somebody who they respect, which hopefully would be the coach who's kind of just asking, like, why are you saying that? Like, what's the point?
No, for sure. Big time. And we try and build that whole that way of questioning up through the normal training as well. Like, we'll be on the court and we'll be like, okay, we're going to run this certain offense, go see the screen over here. And then they'll set the screen and they'll roll the wrong way. And it won't be, oh, you cut that out, run it this way. It's, why did you roll that way? Okay, now think about, what do you reckon there would be a better way to roll? Is there a better kind of fundamental that we're trying to achieve that you can pull into this? And they think, and then they go, oh yeah, I could roll the other way because that way I've always got my eye on the ball. I'm always open to the ball, stuff like that. I'm boxing someone out, and then you kind of go, okay, now use that line of reasoning, that way of thinking, that way about questioning what you're doing, and put it into other areas of your life. Now, is that the same for using a homophobic slur? Is that the same way? Can you use that same kind of questioning and reasoning to figure out what you should do with your life, with your job, or something like that? Yeah. Or it all flows through but it only flows through well if you, as a coach, explain it well and kind of foster that analytical thinking and reasoning.
I think that's great. Get them thinking, get them having to explain themselves, and also kind of creating that atmosphere where if they don't have the answer, that they feel okay asking questions or sharing their thought process out loud. Yeah. I know some of my favorite moments are when I question a girl about why she set the screen that way, and she looks at me and she's like, I thought I did it right. And I was like, yeah. You did do it right. I just wanted you to explain it to me. And it's just frozen for a loop completely. It's funny. You know, sometimes questioning them even when they do the right thing too, because it's not always just, no, sometimes you did something wrong. You did it right. I just want to make sure you know why. Absolutely.
Exactly. So, it's that old thing of you don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. And if they don't know why they're doing the right thing, then it's not gonna foster long-term growth. So I completely agree with you on that one.
Yeah, you if they're doing something right, you don't want to leave it up to chance that they just know how to do it all the time. Make sure they understand the process of why they did it right, and they'll hopefully be able to do it in a game. So we've kind of bled into this next question, but there's definitely more we can add on to it. So you are intentional with your practice planning and with your program building and your culture building to make sure that you're really focusing in on those life skills that you want your players to use beyond basketball. Do you have some examples? I know we've already talked about a couple, but do you have some examples of how you build this teaching of life skills and making sure that you're being intentional with that as you're doing your practice planning or even coaching a game or building your program?
Yeah, I'd say that the biggest thing is really, you touched on it a little bit when you talked about creating that environment where players are comfortable in asking questions and comfortable in being challenged and challenging. Like, I, as a coach, am always fine for my players to challenge me. In terms of pure basketball, if I say, okay, we're going to go over here, dribble handoff, screen here, blah, 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 and they say, oh, what's the point of that? Why can't we just do it this way? I'm fine for a player to do that, but I've seen other coaches kind of, if a player dares to question them, they take it as a personal insult and they'll get riled up and kind of go off at the player for that. I personally, as a coach, I enjoy that. It shows that the player's thinking. It shows that the player's willing to question me as someone who does, you know, if we're being straight up, have kind of authority over them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a wonderful thing. If a high school age kid can talk to a fully grown man and say, I think you might be a little bit wrong with this. I think that's going to really take a player far. So yeah, really building that environment that players are comfortable in and comfortable and willing to be wrong and to risk being wrong. Because I mean, in the game of basketball, every time you go for a layup, you risk missing the layup. So that's just life. Every time you try something, you risk screwing it up. So if these players in training, which should be the safest area in terms of sport, is where coaches love players to mess up so that they don't mess up in the game. So if we can bring in that mentality into their what's the word, emotional well-being, I guess. Where they're willing to be wrong, where they're willing to ask questions. I think that really fosters everything that we're talking about. If they're in an environment like I mentioned, if they're in a bad environment at home, where asking a question gets them a slap around the head. You know, you see kids all the time. They close up. They don't want to risk anything. They're scared of it. So if you can foster an area where they're just willing to go at it with you, fantastic.
Well, that's such a good point about the way that you treat some of the players. You know, if you are instinctively, you just feel like scolding them or yelling at them or berating them for making a mistake and whatever. If they get that sort of treatment at home, you know, it in a sense, we're just sort of adding on to that probably less than ideal home experience that they're getting. And so I think it is really important to just understand that we model like adult communication with our players. Like we model like how to be a respectful adult and how to communicate as adults. And I think sometimes we forget that responsibility, but it sounds like if you can do that, it sounds like if in your case you are able to do that, that you're kind of modeling behaviors that maybe they don't see from other adults in their life. Am I correct in saying that?
Yep, for sure. And I'll be completely honest, I wasn't like that when I first started coaching. It was a lot more of, what was that? Nah, that was wrong. Let's run us to a side. Let's do push-ups, everything like that. But yeah, over the years, it was easier when I first started coaching because I was coaching my brother, and he was the team captain. He was a very good player, played representative basketball and everything like that. But I got to kind of talk through him as well. And he got where I was coming from with a lot of it. So he was able to then, as captain, communicate to the rest of the team. Look, he's yelling, but the point is you need to do this better. But once I lost him, I kind of looked at it and was like, okay, I don't have a player that has that, that back and forth communication with me at home. I don't have that to kind of be my voice to the rest of the team. I need to be that voice now. And it has done a lot better for the teams that I've coached in terms of their emotional well-being.
So did you think that was a difficult transition for you to kind of go from somebody who, may have taken things more as a personal insult and not like being challenged to having that open environment once you weren't coaching your brother anymore? Were there some stumbles along the way, or did you find it like it was a pretty easy transition for you to be more open to questioning and things like that?
I'd say it was a reasonably easy transition, but only because my brother had helped me build the culture. So the culture of the team by that stage was hard work, was fill your spaces, do all the right things, don't cheat. If you have to do 10 push-ups, do 10 push-ups. Don't do 8. You're going to let the team down if you only do 10. That kind of culture was already built. So as I kind of, quote unquote, softened up, they kept the same kind of attitude towards training. So it allowed them to, the group that I was coaching at that time probably didn't ask as many questions as the group that I'm currently coaching, simply because I had been a bit more adversarial with everything. But so it was probably a harder transition for them than me. But yeah.
Well, it speaks to still kind of being reflective and kind of knowing that it's a more positive experience. And I feel like you're getting a more positive experience coaching by being that way, even if it does mean that players are going to question you. And I believe you mentioned a little bit earlier that you do have other volunteer coaches that you work with, correct? There are
Yep.
other ones that they're there, and are they also kind of on board with that? Do they kind of understand where you're coming from with that mentality, or do they look at you funny sometimes? How does that work with your coaching staff and the way that you sort of handle your interactions with players?
I get each side of that. I have one guy who he was a little bit like a mentor to me in terms of coaching. So he was one of the head coaches when I was a player at school, and then over the years we've grown into friends. We play basketball together, everything like that. So he's a lot more on my side. And even the other week we were discussing coaching styles because we both study sports and exercise performance. I left the study because I didn't really see the potential for jobs in New Zealand in that area. And he took the smartest route that I personally think you can take in that area, which is do the sports and exercise science degree and then do 1 year of teaching college and become a PE teacher. So he's now the PE teacher at the school. And we were discussing how when you study sports and exercise performance and you do the coaching modules, you always talk about and you hear about everything that we're talking about, that interpersonal connection with the kids. Don't yell at them, foster a good experience, a good kind of space for them. And we were talking about that, and the difference you see with a lot of the top teams is that the coaches don't do that. You see a lot of the top teams, the coaches are on their players screaming and yelling and swearing at them, and we were kind of just discussing the contrast between that of this is what the literature says, and this is what we do in terms of fostering a good kind of environment. But these other coaches that are winning big time are screaming and yelling at the players. And we were just kind of a little bit baffled by how that kind of plays out. And of course, disclaimer, we don't see anything that goes on behind the scenes with those teams where the coaches are yelling. They might be yelling at the game. They may have already communicated to their team that I'm going to be a hard-ass coach at the game, but in practice, everyone's welcome and stuff like that. But we were just discussing that. So he's on board with really fostering a good environment and everything like that. But when I coach volleyball, we have a lot of trainings where the boys and the girls train at the same time. And the girls coach she's tough. She's what the hell was that? And do that better, bro, you suck, stuff like that. So when I'm kind of giving a bit more one-on-one attention to a player who's struggling with something, I've caught her eye a couple of times looking over and being like, bro, just who cares if they suck? Let them figure it out on their own. So yeah, I get a bit of each of side of that, but at the end of the day, as a coach, you stick to what you know, and I've kind of grown into what I know, and I'm pretty confident in it.
Yeah, and if you have that confidence in it, and if you're having the positive interactions, and if the players are buying in, and if they're having positive interactions with you, I'm hoping that other coaches may notice that, and they may understand or reflect and be like, these players have a really good relationship with coach. I wonder what he's doing different. And then just sort of that leading by example and kind of just being confident in the way that you're doing things and understanding that like it's right to you. And so that's really what matters, is that you're at peace with it and you're happy with the way that you're doing things. I'm curious on an on-the-court perspective. So some of these teams that you play have these coaches that are yelling and cussing and swearing and doing this, that, and whatever. Do your players sort of, even in a game, like look at these other coaches funny? Do they recognize how differently those coaches are acting than you do? Does it like throw them off at all?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, a couple of the players have come from programs that have coaches like that.
Yeah.
So they're a bit more like, yep, I remember that. Swerve. And then other players that have been with me a lot longer, looking at them like, no, this coach needs to chill. They'll come over in the huddle and they'll be like, yo, sir, this coach is like angry as. What's his problem? They neglect to look at the scoreboard and realize that they're up 50 over the other team. But that's what the coach's problem is. But I think that's actually a really good. I'm just kind of processing it now. I think that's a really good point that you brought up, is when a player can look at the other coach and be like, damn, this guy's off on a different buzz. That kind of shows that that's not kind of okay. if a teenage kid can look at the other coach and go, yeah, that's not really a healthy environment. That's not a healthy kind of place to play in. Then that should kind of tell you as a coach, oh, okay, I'm maybe not doing a great job in this aspect of coaching.
Well, it's funny because one of the reoccurring conversation points that comes up with a lot of people who are into teaching or into coaching is they'll all tell you that kids and teenagers, they pick up everything. They notice everything, they hear everything, they see everything. And so the ways that you act, they're going to see it. And in some cases, the way that you act is going to be how your players act. And I think that that's also something really important for coaches to consider, is that you're supposed to be modeling the behavior that you want. And so if your players act that way, and you're out of control, and then your players are out of control, well, to an extent,
sure.
that's a reflection on the coach. And so now that has me curious on this question as well. Have you found in some of your experience coaching that maybe some of these more out of control or aggressive coaches kind of have teams that also sort of play that way as well?
Oh, for sure, big time. There's one notable high school in New Zealand. I'm not going to say the name of the high school, but there's a notable high school, very good high school. They, so I know in America you have the state championships, and then there's is it Gatorade? There's like a Gatorade Nationals, or no, Geico Nationals.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a little bit hard with the size of America to really get all the best teams together for a set national champion. Yeah,
to say the least. Yeah.
Of course, with New Zealand, we're pretty tiny in comparison, so we're able to kind of get all the best high schools together, all the ones that qualify, and have sort out a national champion. So you have to qualify, obviously, to get to nationals. This team qualifies pretty much year after year. They're a very high performing team. Their coach, even though I'm about to talk somewhat negatively about his style, he is obviously very good. He knows his stuff, to get his team there year after year. But you go to the games and you see this dude yelling at the players. You see what I personally consider as a huge, like, one of the reasons I don't like him, big time, a huge no-no for a coach. And you seem like a reasonable guy, so you may agree on this, but he will talk trash to the other team's players as a coach. And I'm like, yo, you're a coach, dude. You can't. Why are you talking to a 15-year-old kid on the other team and being like, you need to D up better on my players? Like, and it's like, to me, you never talk to the other team's players. You can talk to your players as much as you want, but you never talk to the other team's players, especially in a negative way. And the most you do is after the game, really good job, boy. You hit those threes really well. Good job.
Yeah.
You never rip out another team. And this guy will also rip out the coaches, and you see him get 5 or 6 meters onto the court, like, coaches, my bad, refs. He'll rip out the refs, and it's just like, but yeah, you see the translation of his players on the court. Half the time they're getting in fights. Half the time they're, like I said earlier, they get screened and they'll turn around, they'll shove the screener. They're talking trash the whole game. Personally, I'm not a big trash talker fan. I like my players to play with their mouths shut and know how to communicate. But you really do see that translation of how the coach acts is how the players act, and it's just
that would be incredibly frustrating. And I think one of the things that some of these coaches may not realize is when you're acting that way and when you're doing those sort of things, whether you realize it or not, a lot of attention is going on you. And it's almost like you're making it about yourself to a certain point. And, you really have to step back and think of, like, why am I coaching? Like, what is my purpose in doing this? Is me working over the refs and yelling at 15-year-olds on another team? Like, is that what I got into this profession for? It's very interesting to see the way that coaches handle this. Real quick, aside, for me, 99% of the time, if one of my girls gets a technical, then she's probably going to just be done for the rest of the game, just because that's just not something I deal
Yep.
with. My players know that the way there's a certain way and there's a certain method of conduct that you have to exhibit. I'm fortunate enough that our school has won a few sportsmanship awards, and I know some people roll their eyes at those, but I think those are important to me. Those
Oh,
matter
for
a lot to
sure.
me. And so there's a team that we play. I won't name them, like you said. And they're the same way. They're really rough. They're really aggressive. They get into foul trouble a lot, and my girls, all they'll do is they'll just raise their eyebrows at them. They'll look at me and I'll just sort of shrug, and they'll just sort of shrug. And it's
Yep.
funny because when they do that, it almost frustrates them more because they're not getting a reaction. And so it,
No, for
it,
sure.
it might be something to consider too. Like if your players, in just in a general term, if your players don't react to that sort of stuff and they just sort of shrug at it or sort of raise their eyebrows, it might make the other team think like, why am I doing this? Clearly this other team isn't affected by it and they're looking at me weird. So like,
No, yeah,
well, why,
for
why am I
sure.
doing this?
Yeah.
And so I'm curious about your process with that. Do you sort of emphasize that too, kind of like on the court conduct? Is that something that's important to you? Do you have some sort of philosophies when it comes to the way that your players conduct themselves, not just on the court, but whether it's like pregame, postgame, or there's certain things that you make sure that are followed?
Yep, for sure. On the court, first off, don't trash talk, because and what I always say to them is, look, I've seen you guys in practice. You can't handle your own team trash talking to you a lot of the time. Don't bother getting in a fight because the other team's trash talking to you. Okay, just keep your mouth shut. Play the game well. If you want to high five the other team, go for it. Be a nice person. But we don't trash talk around here, because you got to prove that you can handle it to be able to do it.
Mhm.
Um, in terms of talking to the refs, I always tell them, look, you're not going to change the ref's mind just because they called a foul on you and you may not have hit the other player. You stomping on the ground and crying to the ref, nothing's going to happen. Like, you're just going to make it harder for yourself. If you want to make a difference, go to the ref and say to them, person to person, look, ref, I understand that you made that call and I don't want to argue that. I just want to say next time, can you just maybe try and get from a different angle or something like that? And really, I'm going to try my best to actually not hit the player. Can you just pay attention to that player to ref? Is that
Mhm.
okay? And if you say that to a ref, they're going to be very receptive because they're used to getting abused. If you
Yep.
come at them in a nice manner, they're going to be like, oh, you know what? This player's a really decent person. Not a player. We're not talking about a player here. This is a really decent person.
Mhm.
I think that differentiation between player and person is key there, because the ref's not a player. The ref's a person. So if you meet them on that even ground of person to person instead of ref to player, and you show that you're a decent person, the ref's going to be a lot more receptive to you, and it's probably going to work that little bit harder to really make a good call for you in the future.
Mhm.
So I really emphasize that with my players. And yeah, if the other team's getting into you, if they're dropping a couple of shoulders, if they're giving you an extra push here and there, do not react to it. If anything, I it's hard coaching some of these boys because they also don't want to be a narc. They don't want to be a
Yeah.
rat, so they
Yeah.
don't. I'm telling them, look, go tell the ref if he's giving you a shove. And as I'm saying those words, I'm knowing they don't want to go tell the ref. They don't want to be that guy who goes and tells on the other team for an extra shove. Um, so it can be a little bit hard to work out that when you're dealing with a little bit of pride or anything like
Mhm.
that. But I think it was 2 weeks ago we had a game against a pretty pushy school, and the ref, you know, bless her heart, I think she was a new ref, a new junior ref. She got stuck with an unfortunate game to be refereeing, but all my life she was not calling anything.
Ah.
Um, and I think as a ref, it's your job not to only call fouls, but to also manage the kind of tension in the game. If things are getting too shovey, call a few more fouls, kind of set the tone,
Mhm.
and don't let it escalate. And that was not happening in this game.
Right.
So there was a big dude on the other team, and he was giving our captain a couple of good shoves, and couple of extra pushes on box outs and screens, and our captain even got he grabbed the rebound off an air ball and he got undercut by the other team, and the ref stared at him and just let play continue. So it was like, and this and to me that's straight up technical, unsportsmanlike. Like, you don't undercut a player.
Absolutely.
That's something I will yell at my boys about if they undercut a player, because that is, you don't want to end another player's career. But he was, my captain and this other guy were just, this other guy was just giving him shots. And my captain is a reasonably prideful boy, and comes from a pretty, high performing school and tough school that don't really take anything. But I was proud of him because before this year, that would have been a fight. That would have straight up just turned into a fight.
Yeah.
And, the other guy was, he must have been like 6'3", 6'4", and I'm sorry, I don't know how to convert it into pounds, but
big boy, I'm assuming.
85 kg, yeah, solid dude. And our captain's about 6'3", 6'4", a little bit lighter, but very athletic kind of thing. And it would have been a tough fight to break up for sure. But he kind of kept it in as much as he could. He did give a couple of extra shoves on a screen or something like that, and on balls. But he then asked for a sub and sat down on the bench and kind of cooled off. And I said, look, I'm not a fan of the shoves you gave him, but I am proud of you for subbing off and for kind of stepping away from that situation and not getting into a fight, because I know you want to.
Yeah. Well, especially like I think of that situation. I think of that moment, things get heated and things get a little confrontational, and some of our players' instincts are to get physical, but just translating into making our players better people, them getting into fights, out in public and things like that, if these situations happen, are going to be a lot more consequential. So for him to be able to remove himself from that situation is a skill that will help that player in life, for them to remove themselves from a situation. More.
And I always talk to them about, like, if you want to look at fighting as the worst possible outcome, you can throw one punch and you can actually kill someone. If you hit them in the wrong spot, or if they've got some undiagnosed condition or a condition that you just don't know about, you can throw one punch and that's you in jail for the rest of your life.
Yep.
It's not worth it. Do not have a fight. Whether it's on the basketball court, whether it's out on the street after clubbing, whatever. Don't bother with fighting, because it's not worth the risk, and it's a huge risk.
No, and you're absolutely right. There's a bar, a pub in my hometown, where two guys got in a fight. One person threw a punch, the other guy collapsed, hit his head on something, died, and that's it for that. The guy who threw the punch, his life's over. So pretty much. So absolutely makes sense. I know we haven't talked too much really about X's and O's and schematics and things like that, and that's intentional. But I'm curious, with this approach of being more open and being more positive and trying to build better players through better people through basketball, are there some things that you think you're able to maybe do on the court more successfully because you've taken that approach? Are there things kind of like from a schematic X's and O's standpoint that are a little bit easier and you're having more success with just because of that environment you've helped create?
I think we're able to change a lot easier. So if something's not working on the court, we're able to talk about it as a team a lot easier and then make the changes that are needed. I think that's a really big one in terms of the X and O's. Like, we run pretty much a 4-out-1 in offense at the moment, when we verse man defense. And we were running one certain motion off it, and we got back into training and we were looking at the game film and we were just like, this isn't working. Our players have a little bit too much freedom and they don't have enough basketball IQ to really use that freedom appropriately. So we're going to go with a little bit more of a rigid set of this, and we were able to make that change in one training seamlessly. The next game, we implemented it and it ran 10 times better than the one before. And I think that the whole atmosphere of being able to ask questions and being able to interact with each other well really helps foster that. If as a coach you want to make a change and you explain it well to the players, and you've built this whole system of communication and asking questions and everything, they're going to be able to receive that information a lot easier and translate it to putting it into practice on the court for sure.
Well, it also sounds like with that ability to change and make those adjustments just comes from having trust and having your players have trust with you and trust in what you're saying. And if you're that type that's always just yelling or barking orders, it's more of, we have to do this because coach said it, rather than, you know, how we're doing this because we trust that this is the right adjustment for us to make. So I think that's probably been something too that's been successful for you. And do you also find that as your communication been better on the court? I know a lot of coaches are always struggling with their players not talking enough, but has that been something that you've been having some success with too, or do you think your players are comfortable talking with each other, communicating on the court?
Yeah, the communication has got better. When I first started, it was pretty good, simply because it's a little bit of favoritism, but he earned it. My brother was a good player, so he earned it. He was able to kind of see the value of communication very early, because I'm sitting in my own living room and showing him videos and like, do this and everything. So but there were a few teams through the middle of my coaching career so far that did struggle with communication. Now it has gotten better after I've adopted this more inclusive style of coaching for sure. They're just more willing. They also understand the systems that we run a lot more because I explain it to them more, because we work together as player and coach to kind of make sure it's working. And if something's not, they can come to me and say, oh, look, can we move the screen 2 meters down onto the wing a little bit more? And I'll go, yep, try it out. Bang. Now they understand it more. They can communicate it to their team more. They're willing to get in the game and say, look, set that screen. No, 2 meters back. Go back. All right, let's go now. Everything like that. So, the only problem is that our league's just instituted a mouth guard rule. Okay. So now all our players are trying to work out how to talk with the mouth guards stuck in. So. Oh no! And the refs will stop the game randomly and be like, "Everyone got their mouth guards in?" And you see a couple of players pulling it out of their pocket and trying to put it in their mouths while the refs not looking. But apart from that, the communication is good.
Yeah, well, and with coaches who are always looking to build better communication on the court, just having that more open environment and focusing on building those skills beyond basketball probably can lead to that benefit, which it sounds like it is.
For sure. I mean, even with every job you ever have, you have to communicate with someone. Right. Yeah, unless you're. No, I can't really think of any job where you don't have to communicate with someone. So the more you build these skills up with basketball, if you teach them how to translate it into real life, because you can give them all the skills in the world and then they can just sit there if they don't know how to actually translate them. So if you teach them how to translate that into real life, it's going to pay dividends for them in so many areas of their lives, big time. Yeah,
and then making sure too that you're congratulating them and letting them know that they're doing something well, and letting them know that they're doing the right thing. We may think that our players understand that, but they do need to be told, like, hey, this is the right thing that you're doing. Like, you're doing a good job, keep on doing it, and reinforcing those behaviors that you want. So sure. That sounds like a great lesson for us to kind of reflect on and make sure that we're always doing. To wrap up, Coach, what I want to do is to kind of dive into a coaching moment of yours, something that you experienced throughout your coaching career that you might think our listeners can learn from.
Yep, for sure. I'll go back to when my brother was in his last year of high school. So this was probably about 4 years into my coaching career. We don't usually get to play in the very top grade of our local competition, not because we're not good enough, but because of our religious affiliation. We don't play at certain times, which is unfortunately when the top grades games are always on. But this grade had been moved to Wednesday nights instead of the usual time at this particular year. And I said to the boys, look, do you want to play in the Premier grade this year? They've moved it. If you want to play, we can sort it out with the school. And all my players said, yeah, straight up. I'm like, okay, you're versing. I just want to make it clear to you guys. I'm not saying you're bad. I know that you're pretty good. I just want to make it clear you're versing like all the top schools around here. It's not going to be a walk in the park. And they were like, yeah, that's all good. They played the season. They lost against the very top school by I think it was 100. They lost about 120 to 20. And the other school didn't play their 4 best players.
Yeah.
So, and they finished that game. They were happy. They were like, we would rather get it handed to us than to win by that same margin against another school in the lower grade. And the big thing that I like to do is I come in the first day of coaching for the year, and I say to the players, do you guys want to be a social team this year, or do you want to be a competitive team? And, 10 times out of 10, they say competitive, even if they don't really get what competitive is actually going to mean.
Yeah.
But because they say competitive, that means everyone's on the same page. They understand, okay, some players might not get to play the games. Some players might not get a lot of court time. I might not get a lot of court time. But it's about really putting our best foot forward and being competitive. And the culture that you build with competitiveness is the same as any culture that you could build with in any area of the game. And it flows throughout the team. And the whole team, they only won 2 games that whole season, and the whole team thought it was the best season they'd ever played because they were actually up in that grade. They were in the competitive grade.
Mm-hmm.
And they were playing against teams that were going to nationals and everything like that. And it's just that building that culture.
Well, what I took from that story, which resonated with me, is sometimes we as coaches might shy away from having our team play those teams because we as coaches don't want to get embarrassed, or we are going to feel like it reflects on us personally if we get
Yep.
blown out. But if that's what your players want, and your players are going to be happy with it, and they want to compete, and they don't want to be babied, for a lack of a better term, take your ego out of it. And that sounds like what you did, and you're like, okay, if this is what you guys want, let's go ahead and do it.
Yep.
And it sounds like you said they had a great time with it, and they enjoyed it. And so it sounded like a win-win that they got a lot out from it. I'm sure some of those games were a little tough coaching wise, but if they're having a great time and they're working hard and they want to be competitive, then that sounds great, honestly.
That's the one, yeah, for sure.
And so to wrap up, I always like to give my coaches what I call the 60-second soapbox, where I'm going to give you the floor to discuss an idea, a final thought, something you might not have gotten to explain yet. So to wrap up, Coach, I'm gonna give you the floor, the 60-second soapbox. Go ahead.
All right. I'll probably go with reiterating a point that I slightly touched on earlier. It's really just remember what you are providing for these kids as a coach. It can carry them through their entire lives. We have a huge stadium here where I live, and you go down on a Monday night and you see hundreds of people playing volleyball. You go down on a Wednesday night, you see hundreds of people playing basketball. What you provide for these kids while they're at school in terms of coaching, in terms of them being able to play sport at a high level, that can give them the confidence to go through so many parts of lives. They can have, you go down on a Wednesday night, you see people who work absolutely horrible jobs, and for that hour of a game, they're free from all the hardship of life because they're playing basketball. And what we provide for these kids at high school as coaches is the opportunity to be really good at something. And they might have nothing else in their life at that time they are necessarily proud of, that they feel confident in, but they can feel proud and confident in that sport. And if your player's a D1 player and he goes off and becomes a pro, high five, good on him. But every other player on that team also can be proud of what their team accomplished and who they are as a player, and know that they can go anywhere in the world, play a sport, connect with people, and have that really carry them through life.
Well, that's such a great closing moment. Is that basketball court, like you said, whether it's for the student, or whether it's even for adult, maybe that best hour that they get, or as a student, might be the best experience that they have in school. And we have such a opportunity to make that such a positive one, and give them skills and give them something like positive that they can carry forward with them in life. And it's a huge responsibility, but it's also a huge honor, I think, that we have, and something we should take pride in that we're able to do. So 100% agree with that. Well, thank you so much. This was a great discussion, and something for all of us to keep in mind as we go about coaching. You know, we do so much more than just teach X's and O's and things on the court. We teach life lessons. We have the opportunity to grow great people through basketball, and I'm so happy that there are coaches like yourself and so many others who believe in that. So, Coach Anderson, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Good luck this season. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much, mate, for having me on. Best of luck for your season if it gets going, if it is going. And I hope COVID disappears nice and fast for you.
Yes, I sincerely hope so. Thank you for that. And thank you so much for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.